The Grandest Kingdom by Dallas DeGisery. Africa is uncivilized, undeveloped, and has no technological feats. This is the propaganda spewed by the governing white bodies that flooded into Africa during the 1600s. And these poisonous lies still infect us today. Currently, Africa is destabilized and in poverty. But up until 500 years ago, it was the most advanced civilization on Earth in every way except for military might. Africa's modern problems stem from the same place as those of Native Americans, the European colonists that came in and trampled their land. The natives of both regions were typically nomadic, but African tribes were nomadic because they had unpredictable climate throughout their region. This made it difficult for growing crops, so every few years they would have to move where they lived. The nomadic nature of African tribes made it rare for any city to be inhabited long enough to rise to prominence. Because of this, African structures were generally quite portable and rarely actually a solid structure. To the African people's grave misfortune, Europeans only gauged civilization based on the size of won cities and armadas. So when they looked at African societies, they judged them as being uncivilized. Much like in the Americas, the European forces easily overwhelmed the African people with their guns. Once they finished conquering the land, they drew arbitrary lines across the continent, making countries that split tribes apart and grouped rival nations together. Even the largest African cities were unable to offer any real resistance to the superior European forces. Trade capitals like Timbuktu soon became hubs for slave trading. Cities like Great Zimbabwe and Kilwa both traded European hands several times as the Europeans sought the hidden knowledge within them. Europeans could tell that these two cities were built using architectural feats that the Europeans would actually never be able to replicate. This time of great conflict set back the whole world decades, as many of Africa's advanced medical methods would be lost to time. The African people had passed their history down orally, so none of their methods were written down. Those with great medical knowledge would wind up enslaved or dead. Century-old African practices, like C-sections, would take decades to reach Europe. When smallpox stormed North America, it was a slave named Wonsmus who attempted to trade the cure for smallpox to his master, Cotton Mather, for his freedom. Cotton Mather gladly accepted the trade and became credited with discovering the smallpox vaccine. Decades later, Wonsmus died, still enslaved to Cotton Mather. If you are still unconvinced about how further ahead Africa was to the rest of the world, you can look to the pyramids or the Lighthouse of Alexandria. Africa truly was composed of the grandest kingdoms. Their kingdoms only fell because they were too civilized to wage wars of death on a scale as great as the Europeans. If somebody set fire to your home, of course they would believe you have nothing. Their venomous flames still burn brightly today, and have much of the world fooled as to how grand the kingdoms of Africa were.